My Father's Merciless Boss, written and narrated by Moonbeam Audiobook. Chapter 1. The silence of the house was a new, suffocating thing. It had only been 3 days since her father's death, but the quiet had already rotted, turning from a familiar peace into the stagnant, heavy air of a tomb. May knelt on the tatami, her spine a straight, unyielding line of practiced discipline. But inside, she was crumbling. The air, usually fragrant with the clean, grassy scent of matcha and the sweet, woody smell of sandalwood incense, now held only the faint, sour odor of her father's fear and the metallic tang of her own. Her father, the Triad's most trusted accountant. A man of quiet precision, a man who loved the delicate click of abacus beads and the perfect, balanced ledger. A man who had, in the end, been a fool. He had skimmed. He had taken from the Serpent's hoard a mistake so catastrophically stupid, so profoundly arrogant, that it had cost him his life. They had found him in his small, discreet office across town. A single neat bullet hole in his temple. A message. An accounting. The books, balanced at last. May had been left with nothing. The house, this small, perfect sanctuary of pale wood and paper screens that her father had built for her mother, was not his. It was the Triad's. The art, the furniture, the priceless antique tea implements, all, she now understood, were not gifts, but loans. They were trinkets from the hoard, permitted to be held but never owned. She was an asset. And the debt was not paid. She closed her eyes, forcing her breath into the slow, meditative rhythm that had governed her entire life. Ichigo, Ichi. One time, one meeting. This moment, this breath will never come again. Be present. But to be present was to be in a state of pure, liquid terror. She was 20 years old. She had no money, no family, and she was the property of the man who had ordered her father's execution. He was coming. She knew it. The debt was still on the ledger, a glaring crimson imbalance, and Jin, the Serpent Lao, did not tolerate imbalance. When the knock came, it was not the violent, splintering crash of a boot she had been dreading. It was a sound that was, in its own way, far more terrifying. Talk, talk, talk. 3 soft, precise, impossibly patient raps on the wooden door. It was not a request. It was an announcement. A summons. May's heart seized, a cold fist clamping around it. She did not move for a full 10 seconds. The silence stretched, pulling taut. He was out there, waiting. He knew she was in. He knew she was kneeling just 20 feet away, paralyzed. He was letting her feel the terror. He was savoring it. Her hands, resting on her silk-clad knees, were shaking. Not a tremor, but a violent, humiliating quake. She balled them into fists, her nails digging into her palms, the sharp, crescent-shaped pain a welcome anchor in the spinning void of her fear. Discipline. The word was her mother's, a ghost's whisper in her ear. Discipline is the wall that holds back the chaos. Do not shame us. May rose. It was the hardest single movement of her life. Her legs felt like water, her knees brittle. She walked to the genkan, the small entryway, her tabi socks making no sound on the polished wood. Her hand, when she reached for the simple, sliding lock, was pale and slick with a cold sweat. She slid the door open. The man who stood on her step did not look like a monster. He looked like a scholar or a CEO. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke Western-style suit of such a dark, matte charcoal gray that it seemed to drink the meager afternoon light. It was cut with an austere, almost military precision. He wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt, with a collar so sharp it could have cut skin. He was not alone. Flanking him, standing just off the stone step, were 2 mountains in black suits. Their presence was a blunt, physical threat, all broad shoulders, scarred knuckles, and impatient animal energy. They were the visible violence, the hammers. But he was the menace. Jin, the Serpent Lao, was a man of unfathomable stillness. His face was beautiful, a collection of sharp, elegant planes, and a strong, aristocratic jaw. His hair was thick and black, swept back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that held her, that stopped her breath. They were dark, almost black, and utterly, terrifyingly empty. They were not cruel. They were not angry. They were simply neutral. They were the eyes of a god, or a reptile, an ancient, cold intelligence that looked at the world and saw only things, not people. He did not look at her. His gaze moved past her, into the house, his eyes cataloging the space, the clean lines, the scroll on the wall. He was assessing his property. "You are May," he said. His voice was not a growl. It was a low, smooth baritone, cultured, unhurried, and colder than the stone step he stood on. He never raised his voice. Her father had once whispered in a rare, drunken moment of fear. He never had to. May could not find her voice. She simply inclined her head, a short, jerky bow. Jin's gaze finally, slowly, settled on her. It was a physical weight. It was not the leering, invasive look of a brute. It was the calculating, curious gaze of an appraiser. He was noting the quality of her kimono, the genuine fear in her eyes, the paleness of her skin. He was taking inventory. "I am here for the payment," he said, his voice flat. "Your father's debt. 1.8 million. His. And yours." May felt the blood drain from her face. She was drowning. I have nothing," she whispered, and she hated the small, trembling sound of her own voice. You know I have nothing. You took everything. He had nothing." "He had you," Jin corrected, not unkindly, but with the simple, irrefutable logic of a banker. "An asset. His only remaining one. Untouched, well-educated, skilled in the traditional arts." He was quoting, she realized with a cold shock, from her father's desperate final letters. He had been trying to sell her. A wave of shame and rage so profound it almost made her gag washed over her. Jin Lao saw the flash of fire in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw, and a flicker of something moved in the black depths of his gaze. Not interest, not yet. Curiosity. "I will not be..." May began, her voice shaking with a sudden desperate fury. "I am not." "You are whatever I say you are," Jin interrupted, his voice still perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "You are collateral. The debt is due. You will come with me." "No," she breathed. One of the mountains behind him took a single, eager step forward, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Jin Lao did not even look at him. He simply raised one hand, a small, elegant gesture, and the man froze as if turned to stone. Jin looked at May. He was, she realized, amused. She was a mouse, trying to bargain with the serpent whose coils were already wrapped around her. "No?" he repeated, as if the word were a foreign, interesting sound. May's mind was screaming. She had seconds. Her entire life had been compressed into this single, terrifying moment, this one, impossible Ichi. She had no power. She had no money. She had no future. She had only... Her eyes darted from his cold, assessing face, past his shoulder and into her tea room. She saw the iron kama, the kettle, sitting cold on its brazier. She saw her mother's chawan, the cracked, kintsugi-mended bowl, sitting on its silk cloth. She had one thing. The one thing her father had not been able to sell or gamble or lose. Her discipline. Her art. She did not know where the words came from. They seemed to rise from her hera, from the deep, calm center that her mother had spent a lifetime building in her. "Will you not come in?" she asked. Her voice was still shaking, but the words were correct. They were the words of a host, of a Teishu. "It is cold, Mr. Lau. Let me serve you tea." The two guards stared at her, as if she had just grown a second head. One of them let out a short, disbelieving snort. But Jin Lao did not. His head tilted, just a fraction of an inch. The amusement in his eyes was replaced by that new, sharper curiosity. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw the terror, yes, but he also saw the unyielding spine beneath it. He saw the genuine, ingrained programming of her art. She was terrified for her life, and yet her training, her grace, was offering hospitality to the man who had come to collect her. It was, he thought, the most courageous and pathetic thing he had ever seen. "Tea," he said, tasting the word. "Yes," May said, her voice gaining a fractional amount of strength. "Before we discuss the accounts, you are a guest in my home. I will serve you." A long, agonizing silence stretched. Jin Lao's cold, reptilian gaze swept over her face, searching. He was looking for the trick, the angle. He found none. He found only a terrified girl, clinging to the only ritual she had left. "Very well," he said. And the words were a judgment. A death sentence or a reprieve she did not know. He slipped off his immaculate handmade leather shoes, placing them neatly on the stone, and stepped up into her house. "Just me?" he said over his shoulder. The two guards bowed, their faces impassive, and remained at the door, two statues of violence guarding the sanctuary. Jin Lao followed her down the short, narrow hall. She could feel his presence behind her, a cold, dark shadow that blocked out all light. He was silent, his stockinged feet making no sound. He was, she realized, a natural predator. He moved with a liquid, unhurried grace that was utterly at odds with the brutal empire he commanded. She slid open the shoji screen to the tea room. "Please," she murmured. He entered the small 4.5 tatami room and knelt in the guest's position, his back to the tokonoma alcove. He did it with an easy, practiced fluidity that surprised her. He did not look like a man who was comfortable in a traditional space, yet he knelt as if he had been born to it, his expensive suit somehow not looking out of place. May's hands were shaking so badly she could barely strike the match to light the charcoal in the brazier. Her mind was a white, screaming noise. "He is here. He is here. He killed my father, and he is sitting in my mother's tea room." "Discipline." The ghost voice again. She went to the mizuya, the small preparation area, and took her mother's chawan. She held it for a second, her thumbs tracing the gold-filled crack. Stronger at the broken place. God, let it be true. She began the ceremony. Her hands, through sheer agonizing force of will, steadied. The ritual took over. The chaos in her mind receded, pushed back by the familiar, meditative sequence of actions that were as much a part of her as her own blood. Wipe the caddy, purify. Wipe the scoop, purify. Fold the fukusa, the silk cloth. Focus. Ladle the hot water. The steam rises. Calm. Pour out the water. Wipe the bowl. Cleanse. She was aware of him, aware of his stillness. He did not move. He did not fidget. He simply watched. His eyes were on her hands, and the focus was so absolute, so intense it felt like a physical touch, a heat on her skin. He was not watching a ceremony. He was watching her. He was watching her master her own terror, bind it, and channel it into a set of precise, graceful movements. She picked up the chasen, the bamboo whisk, and her hand was steady. She scooped the matcha, a perfect emerald green mound, into the bowl. She added the water. Then she began to knead. The sound of the whisk, A sharp, rhythmic shh against the ceramic was the only sound in the world. It was her and him, and this one impossible moment. She finished, the tea a thick, perfect froth, the color of new moss. She raised the bowl, turned it to present its most beautiful side, the golden kintsugi seam, and placed it before him. She bowed. Jin Lao looked at the bowl. He looked at the cracked, gold-filled seam. He looked at her face pale, her head bowed, her hands resting on her knees. "You are very skilled," he said, his voice a low, neutral thing. "Your father, he did not deserve you." May's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "He was a weak man," Jin continued, his gaze returning to the bowl. "He was a man of appetites. He loved things he could not afford. He loved women, he loved gambling, and he was, in the end, a coward. He stole from me, and he tried to offer his only daughter to settle the account. A pathetic creature." "Stop," May whispered, the word a small, broken thing. "But you," Jin said, ignoring her. "You are not like him. You are terrified. I can smell it on you, a sharp copper scent. You are in mourning, and yet you are here. Your hands are steady. You have grace." He reached out and picked up the bowl. He studied it, his thumb tracing the golden seam, just as hers had done. "You know what I have come to do," he said. "Please," she begged, the tears she'd refused to shed for 3 days finally welling, hot and stinging. I will work. I will do anything. I will clean. I will cook. Quote. "I have cooks," he said, his voice dismissive. "I have cleaners." He looked at her, his black eyes unreadable. "But I do not have this." He gestured with his chin to the bowl, the whisk, the silent, peaceful room. "You have no money to pay your father's debt," he stated. "I have this," May whispered, echoing his gesture. It was all she had. "I have my art. I have my loyalty." Jin Lao held her gaze. He was a serpent, coiling, deciding. "Your loyalty?" he repeated. "A commodity more valuable and more rare than gold, and much harder to keep." He raised the bowl. He examined the golden crack. Then he turned it, and deliberately, his eyes on hers, he placed his lips against the kintsugi seam and drank. He drank the tea in 3 slow, deliberate sips. He finished. He placed the bowl back on the tatami. "The debt is not paid," he said, his voice flat, "but the terms of the collection have changed." He rose, a single fluid motion. May knelt, frozen. "You are no longer your father's daughter?" he said, standing over her. "You are no longer a free woman? You are my employee. You will come to my home and you will live there. And every day at sunset you will serve me tea. You will bring this silence into my house." He looked down at her, a beautiful, terrifying, and utterly merciless man. "You will be my tea master, May, and you will be my prisoner. Your loyalty is the collateral. Do not make me collect." He turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps silent on the wood. May was left kneeling, her world shattered and remade, the scent of green tea and terror in her lungs, the ghost of her mother whispering, "Discipline, discipline, discipline." Chapter 2. For a full minute after his silent departure, May remained kneeling. She was a statue carved from ice, brittle and frozen, the echoes of his final words, "Prisoner, collateral, do not make me collect," reverberating in the new, profound emptiness of the room. The silence he had claimed to admire had returned, but like her father's house, it was now corrupted. It was no longer her sanctuary. It was his. He had come in, tasted its peace, and in doing so had claimed it, owned it, and tainted it with the metallic scent of his power. The spell was broken by a shadow falling across the shoji screen. followed by the sound of a throat being cleared. It was a gruff, impatient noise, a blunt instrument tearing through the delicate fabric of the moment. May's head snapped up. One of the mountains, the one who had snorted at her offer of tea, was standing in the hallway, his bulk filling the frame. His face was a mask of bored contempt. "You have 10 minutes," he grunted, his voice a low, gravelly thing that scraped against her nerves. "Pack. Personal items only." Personal items. The words were a cruel joke. What, in this house, was truly hers? The house itself was Triad property. The furniture, the scrolls, the antique comma she had just used to boil his water. All of it belonged to the man who had just enslaved her. She looked around the small, perfect room, her gaze frantic. She owned her clothes. She owned the simple, straw Zori sandals by the door. And she owned... Her eyes landed on the Mizuya. Discipline. The ghost voice. It was no longer a comfort. It was a command. May rose from her knees. Her legs were shaky, a newborn foal's, but she forced them to hold her. She walked past the guard, who did not move to make way for her, forcing her to squeeze by, her silk-clad shoulder brushing against the hard wool of his suit. It felt like brushing against a stone wall. He smelled of tobacco and sharp, unpleasant cologne. She went to her room, a small, austere space at the back of the house. She pulled out a single, battered leather suitcase. Her mother's. She opened it on her futon. Her hands, which had been so steady during the ceremony, were now shaking again. The adrenaline of her defiance draining away, leaving a cold, hollow dread. Personal items. She packed methodically, her mind detaching, observing her own movements as if from a great distance. She packed her plain cotton sleep yukata. She packed her undergarments. She packed a simple dark blue kimono, one she had worn for daily chores, and her set of formal black Monsuki kimono, the one she wore for her mother's memorial. It felt like a sacrilege to bring it into that man's house, but it was hers. She packed her tabi socks. She packed a small lacquered box containing her mother's few simple hairpins. Then she went back to the tea room. The guard was still there, watching her, his arms crossed over his massive chest. He looked impatient. May ignored him. She knelt and began to clean her tea implements. She cleaned the chawan, her mother's bowl, with its golden seam, with a reverence that was a prayer. She dried it, her hands moving with gentle, practiced care, and wrapped it in a square of old, indigo-dyed silk. She placed it in the suitcase. She cleaned the chasen, the delicate bamboo whisk, shaking it out and setting it on its ceramic holder to dry. She could not pack it wet. "Time's up," the guard grunted, checking the thick, ostentatious watch on his wrist. "It is not dry," May said, her voice flat. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the whisk. "If I pack it damp, the bamboo will splinter. It will be ruined." The man stared at her. "It's a stick. Put it in the bag." "No," May said. It was the second time she had said that word today. The first time to his master had been an act of desperate, terrified defiance. This time it was a statement of cold, hard fact. It was a small, unmovable point of resistance. She would not allow this last, precious piece of her mother's legacy to be destroyed by this brute's impatience. The guard's face darkened. He took a step toward her, his hand balling into a fist. "Listen, you little..." "Bow." The voice came from the front door. It was the other guard. "Leave it. The boss wants her there now." The man called Bao glowered at her, his jaw working. He wanted to hit her. She could see the impulse in the tightening of his shoulders, the feral look in his eyes. He was a creature of simple, direct violence, and her quiet, unyielding refusal was an offense to him. "Fine," he snarled. He spat, a small, sharp sound onto the polished wood of her hallway. Take your stupid stick? But you carry your own bag." He turned and stalked out, his heavy shoes loud in the jenkin as he slipped them on. May took a deep, shuddering breath. She looked at the spittle on her floor. It was a violation, a mark of contempt left in the heart of her home. "This is not your home anymore." She gently took the still damp whisk, wrapped it in a separate, dry cloth, and placed it carefully on top of her kimono. She packed the natsume and the chishaku. She closed the suitcase. The lock, old and worn, clicked shut with a sound of utter finality. She stood, picked up the bag, and walked out of her tea room for the last time. She did not look back. She slid the shoji screen closed, a final, quiet act of severance. The ride to his penthouse was a journey into another world. The car was a black, gleaming, impossibly large sedan. A Maybach, her father would have known. To her, it was just a sensory deprivation tank. The windows were so heavily tinted that the frantic midday chaos of the city was reduced to a silent, blurry grayscale film. The engine was utterly silent. The air smelled of cold, expensive leather and the same, faint, sterile scent she had noticed on Jin Lao himself. She sat in the back. Bao was in the passenger seat, a silent, menacing bulkhead of muscle. The driver was another anonymous suit. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint, digital click of the turn signal, a sound as cold and precise as the tock-tock-tock of Jin's knock. She was being transported. She was a thing, a piece of collateral, being moved from one vault to another. She held the suitcase on her lap, her knuckles white as she gripped the handle. Inside, her mother's chawan seemed to vibrate, a small, broken, precious thing, the last piece of her old life. The car descended, not into a normal parking garage, but into a private, subterranean entrance. A tunnel of gleaming white concrete that led to a silent, private elevator bay. There were no other cars. There were no other people, just two more guards in black suits standing at attention. "Out!" Bao grunted. May followed him into the elevator. It was a large, mirrored box. She caught her reflection and looked away, startled. She saw a pale, terrified girl in a formal silk kimono, her hair perfectly combed, her face a mask of practiced calm. She looked like a doll, a hostage. Bao pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner. There were no buttons for floors. There was only this, and then the doors slid shut with a heavy, pressurized hiss, like a bank vault ceiling. The ascent was so fast and so smooth it made her stomach lurch. Her ears popped. They were going high, impossibly high. The doors opened. May's breath caught in her throat. It was not a hallway. It was not a foyer. It was the sky. They had emerged into the penthouse itself, a space so vast, so open, it felt like standing on a mountaintop. The far wall, 50 or 60 feet away, was not a wall at all. It was a single, seamless expanse of glass, 2 stories high, that looked out over the entire, sprawling, glittering expanse of the city. The sun was beginning to set, and the view was a terrifying, beautiful, godlike vista of fire and shadow. The space was a monument to cold, minimalist power. The floors were polished black marble, reflecting the sky like a dark, still lake. The furniture was sparse, architectural, and brutal. Hard lines of black leather, chromed steel, and dark, exotic wood. There was no clutter. There were no photographs. There were no books. There was only art, vast, imposing canvases of abstract, challenging work, and ancient, priceless sculptures that sat in pools of precisely aimed light. The air was chilled, sterile, and silent. It was the quiet of a museum or a mausoleum. It was the most beautiful and the most soulless place she had ever seen. This was the Serpent's lair. "This way," Bao said. He led her not into the main space, but down a long, narrow hallway, a corridor of unnerving, charcoal-gray walls, identical to the ones her father had described from Jin's office. At the end of the hall, he pushed open a door. "This is you. Don't leave. You'll be told when you are needed." He did not wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing, then fading, leaving her alone in the crushing, artificial silence. She stepped inside. It was not a room. It was an apartment, larger than her entire house. It had the same sterile, high-end feel as the rest of the penthouse. Gray walls, dark wood floors, low, minimalist furniture. A bedroom with a bed so large and simple it looked more like an altar. A bathroom of black stone and gleaming chrome. A small empty kitchen. And a sitting area, dominated by another floor-to-ceiling window. This one looking out over a different, less impressive angle of the city. It was a cage. A beautiful, luxurious, silken cage. There was a woman standing by the window, her back to the door, looking out. She was small, rail-thin, and dressed in a simple, severe, dark gray uniform. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to pull the skin of her face taut. She turned, and her eyes, small and black, took May in with a single, sweeping, dismissive glance. "Oh, you are the one," the woman said. Her voice was thin, reedy, and devoid of any warmth. "I am Mrs. Hino. I am the housekeeper for Mr. Lau." The way she said the title gave it the weight of a general. "He has particular tastes," Mrs. Hino continued, her eyes drifting over May's kimono. "He requires order. He requires silence. He requires perfection. You are here for one purpose and one purpose only, to serve his tea. You will do so every day at sunset. You will be summoned precisely 30 minutes prior to prepare. You will wear the clothing provided for you." She gestured to a set of silk kimono, folded neatly on the bed. They were beautiful, more expensive than any May had ever owned, in shades of dove gray, deep indigo, and plum. "You will not speak to Mr. Lau unless he speaks to you," Mrs. Hino said, her voice a cold, flat litany of rules. "You will not leave this apartment unless you are summoned or unless I am escorting you. You will not touch anything that is not your own. You will not interfere in the master's business. You are an employee. You are, like me, a servant. Do you understand?" "Yes," May whispered. "Good." Mrs. Hino gave a short, sharp nod. "The sun is setting? Your first service is tonight. He is expecting you." A flicker of something, contempt, malice, passed through the woman's cold eyes. "He has already had a custom tea room built for you. It is adjacent to his office. He is very accommodating to his new acquisitions. Be ready in 30 minutes. I will come for you." Mrs. Hino turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her with the sound of a lock, a final, definitive sealing click. May was alone. She did not move. She stood in the center of the vast, empty, alien room, her small, battered suitcase still in her hand. The setting sun washed the room in a bloody orange light. She was a prisoner. She was an acquisition. She looked at the kimono on the bed. Silk's a uniform for her servitude. She walked to the bed, her legs numb, and placed her suitcase beside it. She unlatched it. She reached in and pulled out the indigo-wrapped chawan. She unwrapped it, her mother's bowl with its beautiful, defiant golden scar. She held it in her hands, this one, small piece of her past, this one, true personal thing, stronger at the broken place. She took a deep, shuddering breath. She had 30 minutes. She had to find her center. She had to build her wall. She had to prepare to serve the serpent in his lair. Chapter 3. The 30 minutes passed in a state of suspended animation. May did not move from the center of her new, cold, luxurious prison. She simply stood, her mother's chawan held in a two-handed grip against her solar plexus, her knuckles white. It was a shield. It was an anchor. It was the only real thing in this world of glass and shadows. The setting sun, which had painted the room in blood, retreated, and the city lights began to glitter, a cold, diamond-hard tapestry of a world she would never touch again. The room, lacking the sun's warmth, grew colder. The automated lights in the apartment rose to a soft, sterile white glow, revealing the utter lack of personality in the space. There was no dust. There were no marks. It was a room that had never been lived in. A display unit for a life, not a place to live one. May forced her breath into the gong fu rhythm, the long, slow, deep inhalations and exhalations that centered the mind. Inhale. She drew in the cold, filtered, sterile air. Exhale. She released her panic, her rage, her profound, paralyzing grief. She was a teishu, a master of the ceremony. And the ceremony was not just about tea. It was about creating a universe of calm in a world of chaos. It was about discipline. It was about the wall. When the click of the lock came, she was ready. Her heart still hammered, a small trapped bird against her ribs, but her hands, clutching the bowl, were steady. The door opened. Mrs. Hino stood there, a severe gray silhouette. Her face was impassive, her eyes critical. She looked May up and down. May had not changed out of the kimono she had arrived in, the one from her old life. She had left the expensive new silks, the uniform, untouched on the bed. Mrs. Hino's thin lips tightened, a minute expression of disapproval. She clearly recognized the older, less opulent silk. It was an act of defiance, small and pathetic, but an act nonetheless. "It is time," Mrs. Hino said, her voice a dry rustle. "He is waiting." "Bring what you need." May nodded, a single short inclination of her head. She walked back to her suitcase, knelt, and packed her mother's bowl away with its indigo cloth. She zipped the bag, then stood lifting it. "You will not need that," Mrs. Hino said, her voice sharp. "The tea room is fully equipped." "These are my implements," May said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not tremble. "The chawan, the chesen. They are my own. They were my mother's. I will use no others." Mrs. Hino's eyes narrowed. It was the second act of defiance. The woman was clearly not accustomed to it. She seemed to calculate, her mind weighing the cost of a confrontation against the master's impatience. "Mr. Lau is a man of particularity," she said, the words a clear warning. "He does not like his arrangements disturbed." "Then I will be a disturbance," May whispered, so low the other woman might not have heard. She walked out of the apartment, carrying her battered suitcase. Mrs. Hino, her face a mask of pinched fury, said nothing. She simply turned and led the way. The walk was an exercise in psychological warfare. Mrs. Hino led her not through the grand, art-filled atrium, but through a series of service corridors, sterile, gray-walled, and windowless. They were the veins of the beast, the hidden passages where the true work of the penthouse, the cleaning, the security, the mechanics of power took place. May saw no one. There was only the sound of their soft-soled footsteps on the polished concrete floor, and the pervasive, low-level hum of the building's ventilation. They passed silent, heavy steel doors, each with a biometric keypad. They passed a small, windowless security office where two men in black suits watched a bank of monitors, their faces illuminated in the blue-white glow. They saw her, and their eyes followed her, but their faces registered nothing. She was just another asset being moved. Finally, Mrs. Hino stopped at a door identical to all the others. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. It chirped, and the door clicked open. "This is the tea room," she said, her voice flat. "Do not go beyond it. His office is through the far door. He will join you when he is ready. Do not disappoint him." She gestured May inside, and with one last, cold, appraising look, she pulled the door shut, sealing May in. May stood, her suitcase in her hand, and stared. It was not a tea room. It was a void. It was a perfect 4.5 tatami room, just like hers, but it was a photographic negative of her home. The tatami mats were not the warm, golden green of fresh straw. They were a deep, stark, ink black. The walls were not soft, warm plaster. They were slabs of polished, gray-veined marble, cold to the eye and, she was sure, to the touch. The shoji screens did not look out onto a garden, but onto a single, vast, unmoving pane of glass that revealed the city's lights, a galaxy of cold, distant fires, thousands of feet below. In the Tokonoma alcove, where her mother had kept a simple ikebana flower arrangement, there was a single, ancient, gnarled bonsai pine, its branches twisted into a shape of pained, beautiful agony. And on the wall above it, the Kakemono scroll did not depict a heron or the moon. It was a single, powerful, calligraphic stroke. Mu, nothingness. The void. This was not a room for peace. This was a room for control. This was his sanctuary. The implements provided were, as Mrs. Hino had promised, perfect. The kama, the iron kettle, was a priceless antique, black and studded with silver. The Mizuya preparation area was a minimalist slab of black granite, stocked with dozens of antique, museum-quality chawan in locked glass cases. It was a collection, not a set of tools. It was a display of wealth, of possession. May felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. She had been brought here to be one of them. Another acquisition. Another beautiful, silent, dead thing in a glass case. Number. She set her battered leather suitcase on the pristine black granite. The sound was a small, rude sacrilege in the perfect, tomb-like silence. She opened it. She took out her mother's chawan and set it on the granite, its warm, cracked earthenware body, a stark, humble contrast to the cold, perfect porcelain surrounding it. She took out her simple, bamboo chasen, its tines worn from 1,000 uses. She took out her lacquered natsume, the tea caddy, and her worn bamboo chashaku, the scoop, polished smooth by her mother's thumb. She was planting her flag. A small, tattered, defiant flag in the heart of his cold, sterile empire. She began to prepare. She moved with the slow, deliberate grace of the ceremony. She filled the kama with bottled water, lit the brazier, a button, not a match, she noted with a pang of distaste, and centered herself. She cleansed the bowl, folded her fukusa. She entered the void, her own void, the one of Mu that was about clearing the mind, not about a cold, dead nothingness. She was so focused on her task, on building her wall, that she did not hear him enter. There was no sound. The shoji screen to his office simply slid open, a whisper of wood on wood, and then he was there. He was not a man. He was a presence. A sudden, intense drop in temperature, a shadow that sucked all the air from the room. He was no longer in his severe Western suit. He wore a simple, dark yukata of the highest quality silk, the color of a moonless night. It was unadorned, severe, and it made him look less like a CEO and more like a warrior, an ancient, feudal lord at rest in his fortress. He moved with that same unnerving, liquid silence. He knelt in the guest's position, his back to the bonsai, and the room, which had seemed empty, was suddenly overwhelmingly full. He said nothing. He just watched. May's heart, which had been beating in a slow, meditative rhythm, gave a single, hard, painful lurch. Discipline. She forced her hands to remain steady. She did not look at him. She looked at the water. She looked at the tea. She looked at the bowl. She forced her world to shrink, to become only the few feet of black tatami between them. She was aware, hyper-aware of every detail of him. The scent of him, not cologne, but just a faint, clean, sharp scent like ozone and cold steel. The way the black silk of his yukata fell in perfect, severe lines over his broad shoulders. The stillness of his hands, which rested, palms down, on his knees. They were long, elegant, and perfectly still. The hands of a scholar, or a surgeon, or a strangler. She began the ceremony. The silence in the room was absolute. It was not the peaceful, living silence of her small home, filled with the sounds of a garden and a neighborhood. It was the dead, pressurized, vacuum-sealed silence of the penthouse, thousands of feet in the sky. A silence broken only by the sound of her movements. The click of the bamboo chashaku against the lacquer natsume as she scooped the tea. Click. It sounded like a gunshot. The hiss of the hot water as she ladled it from the kama, and then the sharp, rhythmic sh-sh-sh of the chasen against the earthenware of her mother's bowl. She was pouring all of her terror, all of her defiance, all of her grief into her hands. Her hands were moving, a perfect, fluid, practiced dance. She was not just making tea. She was performing an exorcism. She was proving she was not broken. She was proving she was not his. She finished. The matcha was a perfect, jewel-like foam. A vibrant, defiant, living green in this world of black and gray and cold, dead light. She picked up the bowl. She turned it slowly, her gaze on the kintsugi seam. This was her. This was her scar. This was her strength. She presented it to him, the golden seam facing him directly. A challenge, an offering, a statement. She placed it on the black tatami and bowed, her forehead almost touching the mat. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2. He did not move. May, her head still bowed, could feel his gaze. It was no longer just on her hands, it was on her. It was a heavy, physical weight, a heat that prickled her skin, that burned through the silk of her kimono, that seared the back of her bowed neck. She had never, in her entire life, felt so completely, terrifyingly seen. He was not just looking at her. He was reading her. He was reading the defiance in the bowl, the terror in the perfect stillness of her spine, the story of her grief in the offering she had made. Slowly his hand moved. She watched it from beneath her lowered eyelids. The long, elegant fingers, the perfect, clean nails. His hand covered the bowl, his thumb coming to rest directly on the kintsugi seam. He stroked it. A single, slow, meditative caress, tracing the line of gold, the line of her strength. May's breath hitched, a tiny, involuntary gasp, instantly swallowed by the silence. His touch on the bowl felt like a touch on her skin. It was a violation. It was an intimacy so profound, so unexpected, it stole the air from her lungs. It was the sizzling, electric, phantom touch she had dreaded. His eyes, black and unreadable, lifted from the bowl and met hers. She was still bowed, but she had looked up, and she was trapped. His gaze held her, pinned her like an insect. There was no emotion in his eyes, no anger, no lust, no kindness. There was only that same intense reptilian curiosity. The curiosity of a predator that has just discovered its prey is far more interesting than it first appeared. He raised the bowl. He did not turn it, as tradition dictated. His eyes still holding hers, he deliberately, calculatedly, placed his lips on the exact spot his thumb had just caressed. On the golden seam. He drank. He was tasting her. Her defiance. Her art. Her soul, the sound of his sips, slow, deliberate, and appreciative, filled the void. 1, 2. 3. He finished. He placed the bowl back on the mat, and he smiled. It was not a smile. It was a baring of teeth. It was the smallest, most terrifying, most fractional upward tick of one corner of his perfect, cruel mouth. It was a smile that said, "I see you, I understand you, and you are mine." He said nothing. He simply rose, a column of black silk, and with that same liquid, predatory grace, he turned, slid open the shoji screen, and was gone. The screen whispered shut, leaving May kneeling, alone again in the vast, cold, black and gray room. She did not move for a long, long time. Her body was rigid, her skin alive with 1,000 phantom pinpricks of fire. She was shaking, a deep, internal tremor that she could not control. She had survived. She had made her stand. And in doing so, she realized with a dawning, sickening, and electrifying horror, she had just made herself infinitely more desirable to the serpent who had caged her. She had not been a disturbance. She had been amusing. Chapter 4. The silence that woke her was not silence. It was an absence, a void. In her father's house, silence had been a living thing, textured with the sounds of the small, meticulously kept garden, the rustle of bamboo leaves, the distant hollow clack of the shishi-odoshi, the chirp of a sparrow. Here, in the glass cage in the sky, the silence was a pressurized, manufactured, and processed thing. It was the sound of air, filtered and chilled, humming through hidden vents. It was the sound of a tomb. May opened her eyes. The light in the room was a flat, pearlescent gray. It was not the warm, golden light of morning she was used to, the light that filtered through rice paper shoji screens. It was the cold, indifferent light of the upper atmosphere, pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling window. She had not slept. She had drifted in a shallow, gray, nightmarish state, her body rigid, her mind replaying the moment his lips had touched her mother's bowl, his eyes boring into hers. That small, terrifying smile. "I see you. I understand you. And you are mine." She sat up. The bed was vast, the sheets impossibly soft, but they offered no comfort. She was on an altar, a sacrifice waiting. Her first full day as a prisoner. She rose, her movements stiff. The apartment was just as she had left it. Her battered suitcase, a relic from another life, sat by the bed. On the bed itself, the pile of expensive new kimono lay untouched. A silken uniform, a slave's wardrobe. She would not wear them. She went into the bathroom, a cavern of black marble and cold chrome. She saw her reflection in the mirror and flinched. She looked like a ghost, her face pale and pinched, her eyes wide and dark with a sleepless, hunted fear. Discipline. The word was a prayer, a mantra, a command. She washed her face with the cold water, the sensation a sharp, welcome shock. She tied back her long black hair, her hands moving with their old, practiced efficiency. She dressed not in the silks, but in her own simple, dark blue daily kimono. The fabric was old, worn, and familiar. It was an armor. She explored her cage. The kitchen was a minimalist's dream, all black, handleless cabinets and gleaming, untouched steel surfaces. The refrigerator was stocked with high-end, sterile-looking packages of food, perfectly cut vegetables, vacuum-sealed fish, expensive imported fruits. She found a small, state-of-the-art Mizuya preparation area, complete with a temperature-controlled kettle and a set of pristine, generic tea implements. She ignored them. The living area was empty, dominated by the window and a low gray sofa that looked as uninviting as a slab of granite. There was a screen on the wall, but no remote, no books, no music, no life. There was a soft chime, not a knock. A polite electronic ding. May froze. She stood in the center of the room, her heart leaping. The door to the hallway clicked, and a small panel slid open at the bottom. A tray was pushed through, a service robot, she realized with a jolt. Then the panel slid shut, sealing her in again. On the tray was a simple Japanese breakfast. Steamed rice, miso soup, a piece of grilled fish, pickles. It was perfect, it was sterile, and it was delivered like a zoo animal's. She ate. She had to. She would not be weak. She would not starve herself. She needed her strength. She needed her discipline. The day stretched before her, a vast, empty, gray expanse. Sunset, Mrs. Hino had said. She had the entire day to wait, to dread. She would not just wait. She would prepare. She retrieved her suitcase. She unpacked her mother's implements with a reverent care. She took them into the sterile, black kitchen, and ignoring the automated kettle, she found a simple pot. She boiled water on the stove. She set up her own small, defiant ceremony on the low, cold living room table. She knelt on the plush gray rug. She cleansed the bowl. She folded her fukusa. She heated the water. She whisked the tea. The sharp, grassy scent of the matcha filled the cold, sterile air. It was a small act of defiance. It was her scent. It was the scent of home, of life. She was terraforming this dead space, creating a small, breathable atmosphere of her own. She drank the tea. It centered her. It warmed her. It was her wall. She spent the day in meditation. She practiced her gong fu breathing. She sat, her spine straight, and stared out at the cold, indifferent city, a world of ants below. She did not allow her mind to race. She did not allow herself to spiral into panic. She focused on her one single purpose. She would serve the tea, she would be perfect, and she would be a wall of ice he could not shatter. The sun began its long, slow, bloody descent. The city turned from gray to gold to a deep, bruised purple. The dread began to build, a cold sickness in her stomach. It is almost time. Precisely 30 minutes before sunset, the click of the lock. Mrs. Hino. The woman's gray, bird-like presence filled the doorway. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the simple, dark blue kimono, the suitcase, the single tea bowl on the table. Her lips tightened. "You have been practicing," she said. The words were an accusation. "I am a tea master," May replied, her voice quiet. "It is what I do." "You are a servant," Mrs. Hino corrected, her voice a thin, sharp razor. "You are an amusement. Do not forget it. The master is generous to his pets, but he tires of them quickly. Do not presume." The jealousy was palpable. It rolled off the woman in cold, bitter waves. May was new. She was young, and the master had built a room for her. Mrs. Hino, it was clear, was a long-time fixture, a piece of the furniture, and she resented this new, interesting acquisition. "It is time," Mrs. Hino said, her voice clipped. "Bring your things." The walk, again. The silent, gray service corridors, the hum of the ventilation, the 2 guards in the security room, their eyes following her, the steel door, the click of the biometric lock. Mrs. Hino opened the door and gestured her in. "He is waiting." May stepped into the void. He was already there, kneeling, waiting. He was in the same black silk yukata. He was in the same position. His stillness was absolute, a black hole that pulled all light and sound into it. He did not look up when she entered. His gaze was fixed on the gnarled, pained bonsai in the tokonoma. May's heart did its familiar, painful lurch. She went to the black, granite mizuya and began to prepare. Her hands, she was relieved to see, were steady. The wall was holding. The room was silent, save for her movements. The click of bamboo on lacquer. The hiss of the water. The shh of the whisk. She was hyper-aware of him, of his breathing, which was so slow and deep it was almost imperceptible, of the way the shadows clung to the sharp planes of his face, of the heat and power that radiated from him, an invisible, crushing pressure. She finished. She knelt before him. She placed the bowl, her mother's bowl, on the black tatami. She presented the golden seam. She bowed. The silence. It stretched, taut and agonizing. She watched his hand move, the long, elegant fingers, the thumb finding the kintsugi seam, the slow, intimate, possessive caress. Her breath hitched. Stop. Stop touching it. Stop touching me. His eyes, black and unreadable, lifted and pinned hers. He held her gaze. He raised the bowl. He placed his lips on the scar. He drank. The sound of his sips. 1, 2, 3. He placed the bowl down. He looked at her, his gaze intense, analytical. He was a scientist, and she was a fascinating new specimen, pinned to a board. And then, just as before, he rose, a column of silent black silk. He turned. He left. The shoji screen whispered shut. He had not said a word. May knelt there for a long time, the tremor starting in her hands and spreading to her core. The walk back with Mrs. Hino was silent. The housekeeper's contempt was a cold, sharp thing, a blade at her back. The next day was the same, the gray light, the sterile automated breakfast, the long hours of meditation, of practicing her gong fu, of staring at the ants below, the click of the lock, Mrs. Hino's cold, jealous eyes, the walk, the void. He was there, waiting. The black silk, the stillness, the pressure, the click, the hiss, the shh, the bow, the long, agonizing silence, the hand, the thumb, the slow, tracing caress of the golden seam. Her skin burned. Her body was alive with a tension so profound it was a physical ache. It was a sizzling heat, a wire pulled tighter and tighter. He was touching her, without ever laying a hand on her. His eyes meeting hers. The knowing. His lips on the seam. The sips. 1, 2, 3. The silent departure. Another day, and another. It was a week of this silent, agonizing, intimate torture, a week of being seen, of being read, of being tasted, and of being given nothing. The silence was his weapon. It was a vast, empty space that he forced her to fill with her own dread, her own fear, her own anticipation. She was fraying. The wall of her discipline was still standing, but cracks were beginning to show. She found her hands shaking, not just when he was there, but in the gray, empty mornings. She found her breath catching in her throat when she heard the soft chime of her food tray. He was mastering her, without saying a word. He was breaking her, with silence and a single, recurring, intimate gesture. On the 8th day, she entered the void. She was a bundle of raw, exposed nerves, her skin prickling, her heart a heavy, aching drum in her chest. She performed the ceremony. Her hands were shaking. She could not stop them. A small, humiliating tremor that betrayed her. Discipline. It was a scream in her mind. She finished. She knelt. She presented the bowl, her hands trembling so much the vibrant green liquid shivered. She bowed, her face hot with shame. The silence. His hand moved. She flinched, a small, involuntary movement. He paused. His hand hovered over the bowl. His gaze lifted, sharp and focused. He saw the tremor. He saw her shame. He saw the cracks in her wall. He picked up the bowl. His thumb found the seam. He caressed it, his eyes on hers, holding her captive. He was not just tracing the scar. He was pressing on it. He was testing the broken place. He raised it, he drank, he finished. He placed the bowl back on the black tatami, and then He did not move. He did not rise. He did not leave. He simply sat, his long, elegant hands resting on his knees, and looked at her. The silence, which had been a heavy, crushing blanket, now changed. It became something more. It became the held breath before a lightning strike, the stillness of the air before the serpent strikes. May knelt, frozen, her blood like ice in her veins. Get up. Leave. Please, just leave. Leave me. He tilted his head, a small, curious gesture. His black, unreadable gaze dropped from her terrified eyes to the bowl that sat between them. He looked at it for a long, long time. Then his eyes lifted back to hers. Why this bowl? His voice. It was the first time he had spoken to her in this room, the first time he had spoken since that first day. It was not a question. It was a key, turning in a lock. It was a low, smooth baritone, a sound like dark, polished wood, like aged whiskey. It was beautiful, and it was the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. It slid into the silence and shattered it, the pieces falling like glass around her. May's mouth was dry. She could not breathe. She could not think. He was waiting. His patience was absolute. It was my mother's, May whispered, and her own voice sounded alien, a small, reedy, broken thing in the vast, cold room. I can see that, Jin said, his voice still impossibly, terrifyingly calm. It is old. Earthenware. A simple raku-ware, not like these. He gestured with his chin to the locked glass cases, the museum of perfect, cold, dead bowls. But... why this one? He pressed, his voice soft, insistent. It is broken. He was not asking about the bowl. He was asking about her. He had read her, and now he was demanding she confirm his reading. He was demanding she tear down her own wall and let him in. Chapter 5. His voice. It did not just break the silence. It murdered it. The calm, sterile, pressurized void of the tea room, which she had come to dread as a form of sensory deprivation, was now filled with this new, terrifying element. A low, smooth, baritone sound that vibrated not in her ears, but in her bones, on her skin. It was a sound that did not belong in a room of cold marble and black tatami. It was a sound that was, in itself, a violation. It is broken! May remained in her deep bow, her forehead inches from the mat, her world reduced to the weave of the black tatami. She could not move, she could not breathe. He was not asking about the bowl, he was asking about her. He had seen it. He had seen everything. He had watched her for 8 days, watched her build her wall of perfect, silent ceremony. He had watched her flinch. He had watched her hands tremble. He had seen the cracks. And now, he was not just pressing on the scar, as he had with his thumb. He was taking a knife and sliding it into the fracture. He was demanding she tear herself open for his inspection. He was waiting. His patience was a predator's. He had all the time in the world. He would wait until she either answered or broke. Her mind was a white static of panic. What could she say? Yes, I am broken. My father is dead, murdered on your order. I am your prisoner. You have destroyed my life. Yes, I am broken. To say so would be to surrender. It would be to give him the satisfaction to confirm his victory. She would be just another crying, pathetic woman, another victim. She would be an amusement that, as Mrs. Hino had warned, he would quickly tire of. To say no, to lie, would be pointless. He had already seen the truth. He had seen her shaking hands. He would know the lie, and he would punish it. To say nothing. To remain silent. That was the most dangerous option of all. That was defiance. That was a challenge. And she knew, with a chilling, instinctual certainty, that this man did not tolerate challenges. He crushed them. He had asked her a question. She was his prisoner. She was his collateral. She would answer. The seconds stretched, each one a hammer blow against her spine. The silence, now that it had been broken, was heavier than before, charged with his expectation. Discipline. The word was a faint, desperate echo. She would not talk about herself. She would not talk about her grief. She would not give him that. She would retreat to the only ground she had, the only armor she possessed. She would talk about the tea. She would talk about the bowl. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her head. She did not meet his eyes. She could not. It was too much. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the chawan that sat between them on the black mat. She focused on the golden seam, gleaming in the soft, cold light. She took a breath. It was shallow, and it tore at her dry throat. "It is not broken," she whispered. Her voice was a small, fragile alien sound. A mouse squeaking in a serpent's lair. She cleared her throat, forcing strength into it. She would not squeak. "It is not broken," she said again, her voice stronger, though still quiet. "It is complete." Jin's stillness was absolute. She could feel his focus, a burning physical heat, like a lens concentrating the sun. He did not speak. He simply waited. He was allowing her the rope to either hang herself or to weave something that might interest him. "In my mother's tradition," May continued, her eyes still fixed on the bowl, "this is kintsugi, the art of golden repair." She reached out, her hand trembling, and laid one pale finger just beside the golden seam. She did not dare touch it. It was his. He had claimed it. But she could point. "When a piece of cherished pottery shatters," she said, her voice finding a steadier, more practiced rhythm, the rhythm of a teacher, of a master, "it is not thrown away. It is seen as more valuable. The pieces are gathered. They are painstakingly reassembled, bound together not with a glue that hides the damage, but with a lacquer mixed with pure gold." She finally found the courage to lift her gaze from the bowl to his face. He was watching her, his head tilted slightly, his black eyes unblinking. His expression was not one of curiosity. It was one of assessment. He was weighing her words, her tone, her every micro-movement, against some internal, invisible scale. "We do not hide the cracks," May said, her gaze holding his. It was a superhuman effort. "We illuminate them." The golden lines become a part of the bowl's history. They are a map of its journey. They are proof that it has been shattered, and that it has been healed. She paused, her heart hammering so hard, it felt as if he must be able to see the pulse in her throat. "My mother taught me," she said, her voice dropping, becoming more personal, "that a bowl repaired with kintsugi is not a celebration of its weakness. It is a celebration of its resilience. It is a symbol that it is stronger at the broken place. It is more beautiful and more precious because it was broken, and because it survived." She finished. She had said it. She had laid her philosophy, her mother's philosophy, at his feet. It was her shield. It was her answer. It was her truth. The silence that fell was different again. It was not the silence of the void. It was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a mind in deep, cold, calculating thought. Jin Lao did not move. He did not blink. He just stared at her. And she could see, in the terrifying depths of his black eyes, that he was processing her words. He was turning them over, examining them, looking for the flaws. He had expected her to talk about her pain. She had given him philosophy. She had not wept. She had instructed. His eyes dropped, moving from her face, down her neck, to the bowl, and then back to her face. He was comparing them. He was seeing the metaphor she had so desperately, so obviously laid before him. I am the bowl. I am broken. But I will be stronger. She watched, frozen, as the very corner of his mouth, the one that had smiled before, gave a microscopic, almost imperceptible twitch. He was intrigued. Number. It was more than that. He was impressed. The realization was not a relief. It was a new, fresh, and infinitely more potent kind of terror. She had not placated him. She had not bored him. She had interested him. She had confirmed what he had seen in her on that first day. Not a victim, but a curiosity. A challenge. He leaned forward. It was a tiny movement. A shift of his weight. A closing of the distance between them by a mere 2 or 3 inches. But in the charged, sterile, perfect stillness of the tea room, it felt like a tidal wave. The air between them was compressed, electric. His scent, that cold ozone and steel smell, intensified. He was too close. She was inside his personal space, his predator's radius. She could feel the heat radiating from the black silk of his yukata. His voice, when he spoke, was a bare whisper, a dark, velvet sound meant only for her. Resilience, he mused. He tasted the word, as he had tasted her tea. A fascinating philosophy, to find value in what is damaged. It is not, May began, her voice sharp, defensive. A celebration of resilience, he finished for her, his eyes glittering. He had heard her, he had listened. I heard you, Mei-ling. He used her name, not girl, not you. Her name. It was a brand. A hot, possessive, intimate touch that seared her. He was claiming her very identity, just as he had claimed her mother's bowl. But it is a flawed philosophy, he continued, his voice still a low, hypnotic whisper. He was so close now she could see the faint, dark gold flecks in his black pupils. You assume that the gold holds, that the repair is permanent? He reached out his hand. May flinched, a violent, full-body recoil, her hands flying up to protect herself. His hand stopped, hovering in the air between them. He did not pull it back. He held it there, suspended, his long, elegant fingers spread. He was showing her. See? I am not striking you, not yet. A philosophy, he said, his voice hardening, losing its velvet quality and becoming cold, sharp steel, is a luxury. It is a story we tell ourselves. But the world, Mei-ling, the world is not a story. The world is pressure, and pressure breaks things. His hand, which had been still, moved. It was not a fast movement. It was a slow, deliberate, serpentine motion. It was not aimed at her face. It was not aimed at her body. It moved toward the bowl. He did not touch it. He simply hovered his index finger over the golden seam. You can coat a crack in gold, he whispered, his eyes locking on hers. But the crack is still there. The weakness remains. The fault line is, and always will be, the fault line. All it requires is the right kind of pressure, in the right place, and it will shatter again, and this time, it will shatter into dust. His finger descended. It did not touch the bowl. It touched her hand. The hand she had left resting on the tatami. The one that was clenched into a white-knuckled fist. His single, warm, dry fingertip pressed, with deliberate, analytical force, into the hollow between her knuckles. It was not a caress. It was not a comfort. It was a test. A jolt of pure, white-hot electric fire shot up her arm, exploded in her chest, and stole the air from her lungs. It was the first time he had touched her. She gasped, a sharp, choked sound, and tried to pull her hand away. His fingers closed around her fist. Not crushing. Not gentle, just enclosing. His grip was warm, dry, and impossibly strong. It was a manacle of flesh. She was trapped. "You," he whispered, his thumb now drawing a slow, possessive circle on the back of her hand, his eyes burning into hers, "are a fascinating creature. You have built a beautiful wall, Mei-ling. You have coded your damage in a very beautiful philosophy." He leaned in, his lips now so close she could feel the faint, warm puff of his breath. "I am very curious," he said, "to find your fault line, and I am very patient. We will find out just how much pressure your resilience can withstand." He held her gaze for 1, 2, 3 agonizing, eternal seconds. Then he released her hand. He sat back, the pressure vanishing, the electric current cut, leaving her cold and shaking and raw. He smiled. The full, terrifying, one-sided smile. The smile of the serpent. "Clean the bowl," he said, his voice returning to its normal, calm, baritone command. "The ceremony is over. You have educated me." He rose, a single, fluid, silent motion, and he was gone. The shoji screen whispered shut, leaving Mei alone in the void. Her hand was on fire, her skin was burning where he had touched her. She stared at it, her own hand, now alien to her. It was marked. She had answered him. She had shown him her strength. And he had, in one terrifying, intimate, and possessive gesture, accepted her challenge. He had not just seen her wall. He had promised, with a chilling, sensual, and deadly calm, to tear it, piece by piece, to the ground. Chapter 6. Her hand was a brand. Long after the shoji screen had whispered shut, Mei knelt in the center of the black void, her gaze fixed on the back of her own hand. It was pale, the knuckles white from the fist she had been clenching, but she could still feel the phantom heat of his touch. It was not a lingering warmth. It was a searing, electric imprint. She could feel the precise, analytical pressure of his fingertip pressing into the hollow between her knuckles. She could feel the dry, strong, possessive grip of his fingers as they had closed around hers, a manacle of flesh. She was shaking. It was no longer the subtle, internal tremor of a trapped animal. It was a violent, full-body shiver, a storm that had broken inside her. Her wall of discipline, the ice-cool facade of the ceremony, had been shattered. He had not just found her fault line. He had hammered a white-hot spike into it, and the resulting fissures were spiderwebbing through her entire being. He had touched her. He had threatened her. He had promised, with the calm, sensual confidence of a god, to break her. And he had enjoyed it. He had relished her terror, fed on her flinch. He had tasted her philosophy and found it an amusing appetizer for the main course, which was, apparently, her complete and utter destruction. "I am very curious." His voice was still in the room, a low, velvet, demonic whisper that coated the cold marble walls that slithered across the black tatami. He had turned her sanctuary, her dojo of the mind, into a torture chamber, and his voice was the instrument. Slowly, her body rigid and aching, she forced herself to move. Clean the bowl. His last command. She performed the closing rites of the ceremony, but her movements were wooden, mechanical. The grace was gone. Her hands, which she had trained her entire life to be instruments of peace and precision, were now just shaking, clumsy appendages. The hand he had touched felt alien, a marked thing that no longer fully belonged to her. She cleansed the chawan, her mother's bowl. She stared at the golden seam, the kintsugi line she had so foolishly, so arrogantly used as a shield. He had seen her shield, acknowledged it as beautiful, and then promised to smash it to dust, using her own metaphor as his weapon. You can coat a crack in gold, but the crack is still there. She packed her implements, her hands fumbling with the simple silk cloths. She zipped her battered suitcase, the sound a ragged, ugly tear in the silence. She stood. Her legs were weak. She had to walk back. She had to face Mrs. Hino. She slid open the door to the service corridor. The gray, sterile light was a harsh slap after the tomb-like calm of the void. Mrs. Hino was there, waiting. Her arms were crossed, her thin, reedy body drawn up like a wire. Her face, usually a mask of pinched professional indifference, was alive with a new, venomous, and almost triumphant curiosity. She had heard. May realized it with a jolt of fresh, cold panic. The tea room was not a true void. It was not soundproof. His voice, his final, sharp, steel-edged commands, his low, intimate whispers. Had they been audible? Mrs. Hino's eyes, small and black and glittering like chips of obsidian, raked over May. She saw May's paleness. She saw the tremor in her hands. She saw the raw, exposed terror in her eyes. And she smiled. It was a thin, bloodless, satisfied smile. The pet had been disciplined. The amusement had been put in her place. "The master is finished with you," Mrs. Hino said, her voice dripping with a sickly, sweet schadenfreude. "It seems your education was not as enlightening as you had hoped." May said nothing. She clutched the handle of her suitcase, her knuckles white. She would not give this woman the satisfaction. She would not cry. She would not speak. She lowered her gaze, her hair falling like a curtain over her face, and stepped into the corridor. "He does not like complications," Mrs. Hino hissed, falling into step beside her. The woman was emboldened, drunk on May's perceived failure. "He does not like his possessions to speak back. You are a tea girl, a servant. You are here to pour, to be silent, and to be invisible. You are not special. You are collateral." Each word was a small, sharp stone, pelted at May's already shattered defenses. May just walked. She focused on the rhythm of her gong fu breathing. Inhale, exhale. She built her wall again, brick by painful brick, not a wall of philosophy this time, but a simple, dull, gray wall of endurance. The walk was an eternity. The hum of the vents. The cold, polished floor. The two guards in the security room who watched her pass with their same, dead, indifferent eyes. Mrs. Hino left her at her apartment door with a final, contemptuous sniff. The door clicked shut, the lock sealing her in. May stumbled into the center of the gray room and stood, her suitcase still in her hand. She was alone, utterly. She did not sleep. She could not. She sat, in her simple blue kimono, on the cold, plush gray rug, and stared out the window at the galaxy of city lights. Pressure breaks things. Her hand burned. Her mind raced. The silence of her apartment was no longer a refuge. It was a holding cell. The silence was just the pause. It was the time between his visits. The silence was no longer peace. It was dread. She replayed every word, every nuance, the way his voice had dropped to that inhuman velvet whisper, the way his eyes had glittered with those dark gold flecks, not with warmth, but with a cold, predatory fire, the feel of his breath, the weight of his hand. He had declared his intentions. He was going to find her fault line. He was going to test her, and he was patient. The next day was a new kind of hell. The gray, sterile light, the chime of the food tray. Every sound made her jump. Every second that passed was just another second closer to sunset. What would happen now? The silent routine was broken. The philosophical game was over. What would he do? Would he touch her again? Would he? She could not complete the thought. She shied away from it like a spooked horse. She performed her solitary tea ceremony, but it brought her no peace. Her hands were still shaking. The matcha smelled like dust. The kintsugi bowl looked fragile. It looked like a mockery, a monument to a philosophy that had failed. Number. She stopped, the bowl halfway to her lips. Number. It did not fail. She had survived. She was still here. She was terrified, yes. She was shaking, but she was not broken. Not yet. Her philosophy had not been a shield. It had been a statement. It had been the truth. I am resilient. And he had answered it. We will see. It was not a defeat. It was the opening move in a war she had not asked for, but one she was now undeniably in. He wants to find my fault line? She thought, a spark of cold, desperate anger rising through the fear. Let him look. She drank the tea. It was bitter, but it was warm. It was life. When Mrs. Hino came, precisely 30 minutes before sunset, May was ready. Her face was pale, but her eyes were not the eyes of a terrified victim. They were the eyes of a soldier, however outmatched, who had accepted the battlefield. Mrs. Hino noticed. The small, satisfied smirk on her face faltered. She had expected to find a weeping, broken girl. She had found this stillness. Her lips thinned into their usual razor line of disapproval. It is time, she snapped and turned. The walk. The corridors. The guards. The click of the lock. May stepped into the void. He was there. Waiting. The same black silk, the same absolute predatory stillness. He did not look at her. His gaze was on the bonsai. May's heart hammered, a painful, wild, bird-in-a-cage rhythm. Breathe. She went to the Mizuya. She unpacked her implements. Her hands. She willed them. Be still. They were. It was a miracle, a small, hard-won victory. Her hands were steady. She began the ceremony. The click of bamboo on lacquer. The hiss of the water. The shh of the whisk. She was hyper-aware of him. She could feel his attention even though his head had not moved. He was listening. He was feeling her. He was sensing the change. He was sensing the absence of her tremor. She finished. The matcha was a perfect, jewel-like foam. She knelt. She placed the bowl. She presented the golden seam. She bowed. The silence. It was taut. Electric. His hand moved. May did not flinch. She forced herself to remain still, her forehead inches from the mat, though every nerve in her body screamed to recoil. She watched his hand. The long, elegant fingers, the thumb. It found the golden seam. It caressed it. That same slow, intimate, possessive stroke. Her skin burned. The phantom heat flared. A sizzling, agonizing wire pulled tight. But she did not move. His eyes lifted, pinning hers. He saw her stillness. He saw her defiance. A flicker, the smallest, most infinitesimal flicker in the black depths of his eyes. Amusement. Respect. He raised the bowl. He placed his lips on the seam. He drank. 1, 2, 3. He placed the bowl back on the mat. He did not leave. He did not speak. He just sat, his hands on his knees, and watched her. He was waiting. He had made his move. It was her turn. But she had no move to make. She was the prisoner. He had the luxury of time, of patience. So, he said, his voice that same low, smooth baritone. It slid into the air and wrapped around her. You are not broken, not yet. He was acknowledging her defiance. May said nothing. She kept her gaze low. Your mother's philosophy is admirable, he continued, his voice conversational, as if they were old friends discussing the weather, as if he had not, 24 hours ago, threatened to shatter her into dust. Tell me more. What other wisdom did she impart? It was a trap. She knew it. He was not interested in her mother. He was probing. He was hunting for the fault line. He was looking for her. She taught me many things, May whispered, her voice tight. She taught me about tea, about Ichigo Ichi. One time, one meeting, he translated, his voice smooth. Of course he knew. The concept that every encounter is unique and can never be replicated. That one must treasure every moment, for it will never come again. He paused. Sentimental. Philosophy. It is not sentimental, May said, her voice sharp, defensive, before she could stop herself. It is about focus. It is about being present. It is about paying attention. It is about seeing the value in the now. I see, he mused. He leaned forward. That same small, terrifying, space-compressing movement. And are you present now, Mei-ling? His voice dropped to that whisper. Are you paying attention? Are you treasuring this moment? His hand moved. He did not reach for her. He did not reach for the bowl. He reached for the kama, the iron kettle. He laid his palm flat against its hot, black, studded side. This is pressure, he whispered, his eyes on hers. This is heat. This is reality. Your philosophies are steam. They are intangible. They are stories. This is fact. He was not burned. The kettle was hot, but not boiling. He was making a point. Your father, he said, his voice suddenly casual, understood fact. He was a man of numbers, of pressure. He worked for me for 20 years. He knew the rules. He knew the consequences. May's blood turned to ice. He had found it. The most obvious, gaping, raw-edged fault line of all. Her father. He was a good accountant, Jin continued, his eyes watching her, analyzing her, dissecting her. But he was sentimental. Like you, he made a mistake of the heart. He thought a story was more important than the numbers. He thought he could hide the break. May's breath was coming in short, sharp, painful gasps. Number, don't, stop. He was wrong, Jin said, his voice flat, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. He learned the price of sentiment, and I collected. He smiled. The one-sided serpent smile. And now here you are. His final debt. He had done it. He had found the crack, and he had ripped it open. May was no longer shaking. She was vibrating, a single taut wire of pure, unadulterated hatred. The grief, the fear, the terror, it was all consumed in a sudden, white-hot, blinding inferno of rage. She looked up. She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw something other than fear. He saw something other than defiance. He saw her. The real her. The one behind the wall. The one he had been hunting. And she was beautiful. He saw the raw, pure, unbridled fury in her eyes. It was a fire that burned away the Gongfu calm, that incinerated the Kintsugi philosophy. It was a fire that matched his own. His smile widened. His eyes, those black, gold-flecked eyes, glittered with a new, dark, and terrifying hunger. He had not just found her fault line, he had found the fire within it, and he wanted more than anything in the world to play with it. Chapter 7. The Serpent's Smile. It was the last thing she saw. It was not a smile of amusement. It was a smile of possession. A smile of profound, terrifying, and absolute hunger. He had hunted her. He had cornered her. He had struck her, not with a fang, but with a word, father, and he had tasted the venom of her own rage, and he had found it, not a poison, but a delicacy. He had found the fire inside her, and his smile said, "Mine." May knelt there, vibrating, her entire being a single, taut, white-hot wire of pure, unadulterated hatred. She was no longer a trembling, frightened girl. She was an inferno. The Gongfu calm, the Kintsugi philosophy, the Ichigo-ichi focus, all of it was incinerated in this magnificent, righteous, and all-consuming rage. He had murdered her father. He had stolen her life. He had caged her. He had toyed with her. And he had dared to speak his name. She met his glittering, gold-flecked black hole eyes. She did not lower her gaze. She did not bow. She glared. She poured all of her hatred, all of her grief, all of her newfound, terrible strength into that single defiant look. She, who had nothing, challenged him, who had everything, and he drank it. He drank her fury as he had drunk her tea, and his smile, that one-sided, terrifying, beautiful smile, widened. He was delighted. He had not broken her. He had unleashed her. For a long, agonizing, electric moment, they remained locked like that. Predator and predator. The air in the void was so thick with tension it was a physical weight, a crushing, sizzling, ozone-heavy pressure that stole the breath. Then with a devastating, anticlimactic, and utterly maddening calm, Jinlao's smile faded, though the hunger in his eyes did not. He rose, a single, fluid, silent column of black silk. "Enough," he said. His voice was not the whisper. It was not the command. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. He turned. He did not look back. The shoji screen whispered shut, sealing her in the void with the echoes of his voice and the roaring, untamed wildfire of her own rage. She did not move for a long time. She knelt on the black tatami, her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails were biting, half-moons of pain, into her own palms. The pain was a distant, welcome anchor. It was real. He was wrong. He learned the price of sentiment. And I collected. And now, here you are, his final debt. He had confessed. He had, with the casual, bored arrogance of a god, confessed to her father's murder. He had not just implied it. He had stated it. He had boasted of it. The rage was so potent, so pure, it was almost a religious experience. It was a clarity. It burned away the fog of her fear, her grief, her confusion. She had been a mouse in a cage, terrified of the serpent. Now she was something else. A mongoose, perhaps. Small, yes. Outmatched, yes. But with a single, burning, suicidal purpose. He will not break me, she thought, her breath a hot, sharp hiss in her throat. I will not let him. I will survive him. And I will, one day, find a way to make him pay. It was an impossible, insane, suicidal thought. But it was hers. It was the first truly free thought she had had since he had walked into her father's house. It was a seed of iron, planted in the fertile, scorched earth of her fury. She moved. Her body was stiff, her muscles screaming from the tension. She cleaned the bowl. She packed her implements. Her hands were steady. Not with gongfu discipline, but with the absolute, rock-solid certainty of her own hatred. She slid open the door. Mrs. Hino was there, and she was afraid. The woman, who had been a creature of pure, spiteful, jealous contempt, was now a pale, trembling gray ghost. Her small black eyes were wide, and they were not on May. They were on the door to the tea room, the door from which Jin had just emerged moments before. She had seen his face. She had seen the look in his eyes. The look of a sated and yet still hungry predator. A look that Mrs. Hino, in all her years of service, had clearly never ever seen. And now she looked at May. She really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not as the pet, not as the amusement, but as the cause. May, this small, silent, pale girl in the simple blue kimono, had changed the master. She had evoked something in him that this old, bitter woman had never seen, and it terrified her. Mrs. Hino flinched, she actually flinching, taking a small, involuntary step back, as May stepped into the corridor. She did not speak. There were no hissing, hateful, stone-like words. She just turned, her body rigid, and led the way. The walk was silent, but it was not the silence of contempt. It was the silence of fear. Mrs. Hino was afraid of her. The realization was a jolt. It was power. A small, pathetic, second-hand power, but it was power nonetheless. She had, in her fury, become something more. She was no longer just collateral. She was dangerous. The door to her apartment clicked shut, sealing her in. May did not meditate. She did not practice her gong fu. She paced. Back and forth, from the cold, floor-to-ceiling window to the sterile, black kitchen. A caged, beautiful, and incandescently furious tiger. Her mind was a razor. She replayed the encounter. His words. Her reaction, the shift. He had done it to test her. He had done it to break her. And he had failed. He had, in his arrogance, given her a weapon. He had given her a purpose. The rage, she realized, was a gift. It was a shield that fear could not penetrate. It was a fire that kept her warm in this cold, sterile, gray tomb. She did not sleep. She did not want to sleep. She paced and she thought. She thought about her father. Not his weakness, but his love. The mistake of the heart that Jin had so casually mocked. He thought a story was more important than the numbers. What did that mean? What story? Her father had been meticulous. He had been a man of honor. He would not just steal. A mistake of the heart. It had been for her mother. He had been trying to, what? Get them out. Create a life for them, away from this? A new, sharp, and even more profound ache joined the rage. The motive. It had all been for her. She was not just his debt. She was his legacy. She was the story he had died for. She would not fail him. The next day was a new world. The sun rose, cold and gray. The hours passed. The chime for her breakfast tray did not come. May stopped pacing. She stood in the center of the room and listened. The silence was absolute. She was a creature of routine. Her father had been. Her gong fu was routine. The tea ceremony was routine. Jin knew this. He knew her, down to her bones. He had broken the routine. This was a new test, a new, subtle pressure. He had unleashed her rage, and now he was... what? Starving her? Punishing her? Testing her patience? The hours passed. Morning. Noon. The sun began its descent. No food, no water. Her stomach ached. Her head felt light. The rage was still there, but it was a fire that needed fuel. And she had none. She would not drink the tap water. She would not eat the sterile, packaged food in the kitchen. That would be a surrender. That would be admitting that his test had worked. She would wait. discipline. The click of the lock. It was not the polite chime of the food tray. It was the door. May's head snapped up. Her heart, a cold, heavy stone, gave a single, hard, painful thud. The door opened. Mrs. Hino, the woman's face was a pale, pinched mask of terror. She was holding, not a tray, but a single black silk kimono, one of the expensive ones Jin had bought her. "The master is occupied," Mrs. Hino whispered, and her voice was a reedy, trembling, terrified thing. She could not meet May's eyes. He has guests. Guests. The word was cold. Your quarters. They require inspection," Mrs. Hino stammered. It was a lie. A bad one. "You will dress," she said, holding out the black silk. "And you will come with me." May looked at the kimono. Black. The color of the void, the color of him. It was a uniform, a slave's silk. She did not move. "He insists," Mrs. Hino whispered, her eyes wide with panic, finally meeting May's. And in them May saw the message. "This is not a request. He is not in a good mood. Do not defy him. He will kill us both." Slowly May took the kimono. She went into the cold marble bathroom and she changed. The silk was cool, impossibly smooth, and it felt wrong. It felt like a violation. It felt like his skin, his touch, all over her. She came out. Mrs. Hino was wringing her thin, bony hands. "This way." And she did not lead May to the service corridor. She led her through her apartment door into the main penthouse. May's breath caught. It was vast. A cold, cavernous museum of a space. Floors of polished white and black marble, walls of glass that looked out over the entire, sprawling, glittering city. The furniture was minimal, angular, and looked punishingly uncomfortable. Priceless, abstract, and violent-looking art hung on the walls. And there were men. Not the two, silent, dead-eyed guards in the security room. Dozens of men in sharp black European suits, with wires in their ears, standing, sentinel-like, in every alcove. They were stone. They were statues. And then there were the others. In the center of the vast, sunken living area, there were 4 men. They were not in suits. They were in armor. Not old armor, but modern, tactical, black body armor. They were armed, not with pistols, with short, compact military-grade submachine guns. They were an occupying army. And they were all of them, staring at her. May, in her black silk kimono, her pale face, her bare feet on the cold, cold marble floor. She was on display. Mrs. Hino was leading her, a sacrifice, an offering, through the heart of the war. The master has guests. This was not a social call. This was a standoff. "Keep your eyes down," Mrs. Hino hissed, her voice a desperate, trembling thing. But May could not. She was a tea master. She was trained to observe. She saw them, the 4 armored men, and she saw in the center of them a man. He was not one of them. He was one of Jin's. He was kneeling at a low go table, playing a game by himself. He was huge, a mountain. His head was shaved, a series of old white scars tracing a map of violence across his skull. He was built like a bull, his neck thick, his shoulders straining the simple black silk shirt he wore. He looked up as she passed. His eyes were small, brown, and bored. He saw her. His gaze raked her up and down, and he smiled. It was not Jin's smile. It was not a complex, psychological, terrifying, beautiful thing. It was a simple, brutal, gold-toothed, crude smile. A smile that said, "Meat." He placed a black stone on the go board. Clack. "Well, well," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The little ghost. Mrs. Hino stopped. She was shaking. "Captain Bow," she whispered, her head bowed. We are the master." "The master is busy," Bow, the leopard, rumbled, his eyes never leaving May. He pushed himself up from the table. He was a mountain. He rose and rose and rose. He was at least 1.5 feet taller than her, and twice as wide. He loomed. He walked toward her. He moved with a strange, rolling, predatory grace, like a leopard. He stopped, a foot in front of her. He was invading her space. He smelled of spice and metal. Mrs. Hino had vanished, scurried away like the rat she was. May was alone, in the center of a room of armed, silent, dangerous men, with this brute. "So," he said, his voice softer, conversational. "You're the one. The little tea girl, the boss's new pet." He circled her, slowly, like a shark. May stood, her spine straight. Her hands, hidden in the long, black silk sleeves, were fisted. Discipline. "I heard about your old man," he said, his voice a casual, cruel drawl. "Good with numbers, bad with loyalty. He was weak, like all sentimental men. He was using Jin's word. He had heard. And I heard," he continued, stopping now, directly behind her. She could feel his heat. She could smell the metal. "That the boss collected his debt." He leaned in. His hot, rancid breath was on the back of her neck. "What I can't figure out," he whispered, "is why. Why you? You're just a bird. A little, pale, useless thing." His hand, a huge, scarred, meaty paw, reached out. His thick, blunt finger moved toward her face. "What does he see in you?" May, her heart a cold, hard, hammering drum, her body rigid with a new, cold fury, turned her head. His finger, inches from her cheek, stopped. She met his small, brown, surprised eyes, and with a voice that was not a whisper, not a scream, but a blade of pure, cold ice, she said, "He sees what you will never be allowed to." Chapter 8. The words, cold as a blade of ice, hung in the vast, cavernous room. "He sees what you will never be allowed to." The silence that followed was not the peaceful void of the tea room. It was sharp, metallic, the collective indrawn breath of a dozen hard, violent men. The 2 silent guards by the wall. The 4 armored guests, their tactical leader, even the distant, suited sentinels. Every man in the room who had once been a statue, an abstraction of violence, was now riveted. A tea girl, a pet, a bird, a piece of collateral, and she had just drawn a line in the marble floor with her voice, and dared a Triad captain, the leopard, to cross it. May's heart wasn't a bird, it was a gong. A massive bronze bell struck at its core. The vibration filled her entire body. She was rigid, her blood a solid column of cold. She had spoken. The words were out. There was no taking them back. Captain Bow's small, brown, bored eyes, wide with surprise, narrowed. The surprise was fleeting. 5 seconds of chemical reaction. What followed was slower, darker, heavier. Fury. His broad, scarred, bull-like face flushed red. Hot blood surged up his neck. The gold-toothed smile vanished. His lips peeled back, not into a grin, but a snarl. A low, animal sound rumbled from his chest. "You," he breathed. Not a word, a curse. "You bitch." His hand moved, a huge, scarred, meaty paw, once hovering like a grotesque parody of a caress, lunged forward. Not a slap, not a punch. A grab, a crude, violent, possessive act. He was going to seize her, by her hair, her face, her neck, drag her like a doll, show her what he could do. May didn't have time to flinch, or breathe. The entire world became that hand, that fast-moving symbol of impulse, of power, of lust. It was 2 inches from her face. Bow! The name, not a shout. Not a whisper. Just spoken. Calm. Flat. From across the marble expanse. From the far side of the room. From the go table. From Jean Lao. Still seated. Still surrounded by his 4 silent, black-armored guests. Still locked in a negotiation. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking through Bao-dash-dash. At her. And he was fascinated, not just impressed. Fascinated. His black, gold-flecked eyes burned, not with anger, but with that same dark delight he'd shown her in the tea room. He had seen. He had heard. He had let it happen. May's realization was cold, sharp, total. This was not an accident. Jin had known Bao would be here. He had broken her routine, starved her, draped her in black silk, paraded her through the war room. He had engineered this. He had placed his pet in the leopard's cage, to see which one was stronger. This was not a test for her. It was a test for Bao, a test of loyalty, of discipline, a test to see if his captain, his brute, would dare touch his property. And Bao, in his arrogance, his base brutality, failed. Jin's gaze shifted, slowly, lazily, from May's face to the back of Bao's head. Bao felt it. He shuddered, a violent, involuntary tremor. Captain Bao, Jin said, calm, bored, precise. You disappoint me. A death sentence. Boss, Bao gasped. His voice broke. His hand, still 2 inches from her face, began to retreat, slow and shaky, as if from fire. She was insolent. She was, Jin agreed, smooth as silk. And you were weak. You were sentimental. Their word, her father's sin, Bao's lust, his rage, equated now with love, with failure. You let a bird, Jin mused, a thing, break your discipline. You let sentiment rule you. You are a captain in my triad, a leopard, and you were baited by a mouse. He smiled, the serpent smile. How pathetic. Bao shrank. The mountain collapsed. He turned, bowed, groveling. Boss, Jin Ge, I apologize. It won't happen again. No, Jin said, flat. It won't. He clapped. Once. Sharp. The 2 suited guards by the wall moved. They were on Bao before he could straighten. They didn't grab him. They just flanked him. You are relieved of your post, Jin said, quiet. You will meditate on your failure. For a very long time, you will go to the mountain, and you will think about discipline. Bao's face crumpled. The mountain, prison, exile, ice. Boss. No. Please. Go. Iron. The guards each placed a hand on his massive arms, and Bao, the brute, the leopard, the captain, walked, shuffling, broken. He didn't look at May, he didn't look at anyone. He was a ghost. Gone. Silence returned, but not the same silence. A colder silence. A harder one. Jin had not raised his voice, had not stood, had not drawn a weapon. He had, in the middle of a negotiation with armed enemies, exiled his strongest captain. For her. Number. Not for her. Because of her. She was the pressure, the catalyst, the spark. And her words, ice-cold, measured, had lit the fuse. Jin looked at her again. The hunger was back. The delight. He had found her fire. And now he had seen her wield it. A mouse, slaying a leopard. He was beyond impressed. He looked then at the 4 armored guests. Their leader, the cold, pale Scandinavian, hadn't moved. He'd watched the execution with surgical calm. "Now," Jin said, bright again, businesslike. "As I was saying, the price is the price. It is non-negotiable." He looked at Mei, a command. "Mei Ling," he said, voice warm. Too warm, possessive. "You are late for your duties." He pointed. Not to her sanctuary. Not to the tea room. He pointed to the go table. "My guests and I require tea." He wasn't dismissing her. He wasn't hiding her. He was using her. In a room full of war, of weapons, of soldiers. He was showcasing his peace. He was showing them her. His bird, his calm, his control, his power. Mei looked at the go table. At the 4 armored men. At the submachine guns leaning against their chairs. At the cold, hard face of their leader. And then she looked at Jin. His eyes dared her. "Show me, show them, show me your resilience." Her heart, now a hard, cold drum, beat once. She bowed. "As the master wishes?" Chapter 9. The words hung in the air. As the master wishes. A bow. A capitulation. But it wasn't. It was an acceptance. A parry. A go stone, placed on the board with a cold, quiet click. Mei rose from her bow, her spine a single, rigid column of ice. Her body was screaming. Not from tension. Not from fear, though both were present. Her body was screaming from starvation. She hadn't eaten since the kanji the previous morning. 36 hours? 40? She'd lost count. Rage had been her fuel, but it was wildfire, burning through everything, leaving behind a hollow, aching void. Her head was light. The vast marble room, with its glass walls and galaxy of city lights, seemed to tilt. The edges of her vision blurred like watercolor in the rain. And now, she had to perform. Not in the void, not in her sanctuary. Here, in the war room, in the center of the standoff, in front of them. "My guests and I require tea." She turned. Her implements were in her apartment. A journey, an odyssey. She had to walk. Back through the room of men who had just watched her, a mouse, bring down a leopard. Men who had watched her master end a man's career, maybe even his life, with a single bored word. The mountain. It sounded like a grave. She put one bare foot in front of the other. The marble floor was cold. A shock. A slap of reality climbing up her legs into her spine. Good. Focus on the cold. Her black silk kimono. His kimono, whispered around her ankles. She was a shadow, a ghost. But she was a ghost with eyes. She walked. The Triad guards, once statues, now watched her. Their eyes tracked her. She was no longer just a pet. No longer collateral. She was something else. A catalyst. A linchpin. They looked at her with new, unsettled respect. With fear. She passed the 4 armored guests. Not Triad, something else. Their armor, matte black, light drinking. Their weapons, short, compact, efficient. Not pistols, tools for professionals, soldiers, mercenaries, a rival faction. Their leader, the one with the cold, pale, Scandinavian face, watched her. His eyes were ice blue, arctic, hard. He wasn't looking at her as a woman, not as a pet. He was calculating. Jin Lao plus this girl equals what? His gaze was dissecting, not hungry like Jin's, just analytical. She dropped her eyes. She was not for him to read. She reached her apartment. The door was ajar. Mrs. Hino was gone, hiding. May entered her gray, sterile room, her sanctuary, her cell. Her zipped, battered canvas suitcase was on the floor. She knelt. Her vision swam. The room tilted violently. Breathe. She pressed a hand to the rug to steady herself. Discipline. Gong fu, not just grace, control. The mind over the body. Her body was weak. Her mind was a razor. She unzipped the bag. The click of the zipper was a gunshot in the silence. Her implements, chasen, the whisk, chashaku, the scoop, fukusa, the silk cloth, and the chawan, her mother's kintsugi bowl. She lifted it. Her hands shook, not from fear but from hunger. She stared at the golden seam. Pressure breaks things. You can coat a crack in gold, but the crack is still there. He was sentimental, like you. She had faced Bao, the leopard, with ice, because Jin had unleashed her fire. And now, she had to face them. Icemen, soldiers. She had to perform his ritual, the ritual of peace, in a room full of war. It wasn't a mockery. It was a weapon. Jin was wielding her calm, her grace, her discipline, showing these brutes, these icemen, that he had so much power he could sit, mid-conflict, and drink tea. Showing them he had tamed the wild, tamed her. Number. She looked again at the golden seam. He hadn't tamed her. He had found her. He sees what you will never be allowed to. She wasn't a pet. She was his unleashed demon. A demon of stillness. She took a breath, stood, arranged her implements on a black lacquer tray. She needed water. She went to the black kitchen, filled the tetsubin, the kettle, with cold, filtered water. It was heavy. Her arms ached. Discipline. She walked back, out of her room, into the arena. Every eye followed her. The click, click, click of bare feet on marble. The hiss of silk. She was a priestess carrying the sacrament. She reached the go table, a low slab of ebony, its white grid inlaid with mother of pearl. Black and white stones scattered mid-game. A game of strategy, a game of territory, a game of war. And she was to make peace. There was no fire. Jin saw it. Saw her pause, her eyes on the cold kettle. He smiled. The serpent's smile. He clapped. Once. Sharp. A servant appeared, neither guard nor guest, carrying a small electric burner. Sterile, efficient. He placed it beside the table. Bowed, vanished, control, omnipotence. He had anticipated everything. May knelt. Black silk pooled around her. She placed the kettle on the burner, turned it on. A red light glowed. She was the center. Jin on one side. Black silk, predatory stillness, eyes devouring her, the Scandinavian on the other. Matte armor. Ice blue eyes dissecting. The 4 soldiers behind. The chorus of death. Their guns leaning nearby. May's head swam. Her body screamed. Focus. She took the fukusa, the silk cloth. She began the kata, the ritual of purification. Ichigo ichi, one time, one meeting, and this was the ultimate Ichigo ichi. She would never be in this moment again. Kneeling at a war table, surrounded by killers, starving, preparing tea for her father's murderer. The absurdity almost made her laugh. She crushed it. Discipline. She folded the silk. Perfect. Precise. She purified the chashaku, the scoop. She purified the natsume, the tea caddy. Her hands did not shake. It was a miracle. Her gong fu held, a scaffolding holding up her bones. The water began to hiss. The kettle sang. A serpent's song. She took the chawan, her mother's bowl. She scooped the matcha. The green was vibrant. A splash of life in a black and white world. She poured the water. She took the chasen, the whisk. She whisked. Shh, shh. The only sound in a room full of death. The soldiers watched her, mesmerized. The Scandinavian's eyes locked on her hands. The motion. Jin watched her face. He was tasting her focus, feeding on her discipline. The froth was perfect, a jewel-green foam. She stopped. Silence. It was done. Now, who first? The guest. The master? Protocol said the highest guest, but he was the master. He was everything. She looked at Jin. His eyes dared her. Choose. She chose. She picked up the chawan, turned it. Twice, presenting the most beautiful side. She leaned across the go-board and placed the bowl in front of the Scandinavian, the Iceman, the soldier, the enemy. She had not chosen Jin, she had chosen protocol, tradition, the rules of her art. The Scandinavian looked at the bowl, then at her. May bowed, head low. Duzo, she whispered. Please. She waited. He looked at Jin. Jin was not smiling. He was not angry. He was unreadable, waiting. The Scandinavian, he had no name, lifted his hand. A black armored glove, a machine, and with that brutal, mechanical hand. He reached for the delicate, cracked golden bowl. Chapter 10, The Hand. Black, articulated, mechanical. Built from high-impact polymers, carbon fiber, and tactical, non-reflective dullness. A hand designed to crush, to wield a weapon, to end a life. And it was reaching for her mother's bowl. May's breath, trapped like a bird in her lungs, stopped. This was a new, cold, profoundly intimate violation. Worse than Bao's crude, fleshy attempt. This wasn't lust. It was an abstraction of violence. A machine about to touch a memory. The Scandinavian's ice-blue eyes were locked on the bowl. Not on her. Not on Jin. He was studying the kintsugi. His huge, black-gloved fingers, brutal and inhuman, moved with strange care. He didn't grab the bowl, he cupped it, lifted it from the black lacquer tray with a slow, improbable reverence. The reverence of a professional. A man who understood tools. A man who understood weapons. He was seeing the chawan not as art, but as weapon. He held the bowl like a ceramic egg in his massive black claw. The contrast was grotesque, and beautiful, and terrifying. He looked at her, his ice-blue eyes, cold, analytical, calculating. He had seen her choice, seen her defy the master, and he was impressed. He didn't drink. Not yet. He spoke. Not a rumble like Bao's, not a silk whisper like Jin's. His voice was flat, synthesized, a low mechanical hum laced with an accent she couldn't place. Cold. The crack, he said. Not a question, a statement. His thumb, a broad black spatula, traced the golden seam. May's blood froze. He was touching it, tracing the wound. She couldn't speak. She nodded. A single stiff jerk of her neck. He looked to Jin. Kintsugi, Jin said, purring, narrating his move. The art of repairing what is broken with gold. To make it stronger, more beautiful. A philosophy. The Scandinavian's gaze returned to May. Broken, repaired, stronger, more beautiful. He understood. He understood everything. Who she was. What she was. Why she was here. He was not a brute. He was a serpent of a different kind. He lifted the bowl to his mouth. He had no mouth. He had a helmet. A visor. He paused. A hiss of pneumatics. The lower half of the helmet retracted. It slid up and away, revealing a mouth. Pale. Thin-lipped. Scarred. From lip to chin. A crack of his own. He drank. Not a sip. Not a taste. He drained the bowl in 3 short gulps. An engineer taking fuel. He set the bowl back on the tray. The click of ceramic on lacquer. The helmet sealed shut. He looked at Jin. Good, he said. He wasn't talking about the tea. He was talking about her. About the performance. About Jin's power. He was conceding the round. May's head spun. The hunger, the void. It was yawning wide. She had to move. She had to continue. The master. She took the chawan. It was warm from his mouth, from the machine. She turned to the tetsubin. Ladled the water. Purified the bowl. The kata, the ritual. Intact. Her hands were not shaking. She was not May. She was gong fu. She was discipline. She was a demon of stillness. She wiped the bowl, wiped away his touch. She prepared the second bowl. The matcha, the water, the whisk, shh, shh, shh. The sound, the only sound. It was her sound, her ground. The froth was perfect. A jewel-green foam. She stopped. She picked up the bowl, turned it, twice, and leaned across the go-board. She placed her mother's bowl in front of her father's murderer. She did not bow. She met his eyes. His black, gold-flecked, endless eyes. They were not hungry, not delighted. They were burning, burning with cold black fire. Pride. He was proud of her. Proud that she had defied him, that she had chosen protocol, that she had shown his guest her strength. Proud that she was his. This look, more possessive than a touch, more terrifying than a threat. He wanted her strength, her will, her defiance. He wanted to own it. Slowly his hand, long, pale, an artist's hand, emerged from the black silk sleeve. He did not touch the bowl. His fingers brushed hers. Not an accident, not a caress. Contact, a jolt, fire, ice. May snatched her hand back as if burned. He smiled, the serpent's smile. He knew. She was not calm. She was not still. She was fire and ice. He lifted the bowl, looked at the golden seam, looked at her, and drank. He drank slowly, tasted her labor, her discipline, her fear, her rage. He swallowed. The leopard, he said, his voice a silk whisper. He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to the Scandinavian. He was weak. He set the bowl down. He lacked discipline. He mistook impulse for power. He was sentimental. The Scandinavian nodded, a slow single dip of the helmet. Bao was loud, said the synthesizer voice. He was a dog who barked. You do not like barking. I do not, Jin agreed, pleasant again. It interrupts the game. He gestured to the go board. And now, he said, the interruptions are over. You've come a long way. You've brought your men, your toys. You must have something more than a thirst for tea. The Scandinavian laughed. Not a laugh. A hiss of air. A pneumatic gasp. We have a gift, he said. A stone for your board. He reached inside his armor. Pulled out a tablet. A thin black slate of glass. He slid it across the go board. It stopped in front of Jin. May was trapped, kneeling between them. A ghost. A servant. A confidant. She could not leave. She was part of the set. Jin looked at the slate. He didn't touch it. A gift, he mused. Gifts imply reciprocity. They are expensive. This one is free, the Scandinavian said. A show of good faith. A payment for the tea. He looked at May. And the entertainment? Jin smiled, tapped the slate. It lit up. A face. A name. A list of numbers. May's eyes were down, staring at the froth in the bottom of the tetsubin. But she saw it. Reflected in Jin's eyes. His pupils contracted. A single second. It was not Bao. It was not the leopard. It was someone else. Someone worse. Someone closer. A betrayal from within his own ranks. I see, Jin said. His voice was no longer silk, no longer a whisper. It was flat. Dead. The voice he had used when he spoke of her father. This is a problem? It is a cancer, the Scandinavian corrected. And we are the surgeons. We can cut it out. For a price. The price that was non-negotiable? Jin said. Was. Jin laughed. A cold, short bark. He looked at May. His eyes were black. All black. The gold was gone. He was not Jin. He was the serpent. Mei Ling, he whispered. She looked up. You are hungry. Not a question. A fact. She didn't answer. You will leave us now, he said softly. Go. Eat. He was dismissing her. The negotiation was over. The war was beginning. He had used her peace. Now he was unleashing his violence. He needed her gone. May looked at the slate, at the reflection of the name. She looked at the Scandinavian. She looked at Jin. She bowed. Hi, Goshujin-sama. Yes, master. She gathered her implements. Her hands were not shaking. She stood. The room tilted. The void yawned. She walked. Click, click, click. Past the soldiers, past the guards. The last thing she heard was Jin's voice. So, he said. The silk returned. Let us discuss the price of surgery. Chapter 11. The click. The click. The click. Her bare feet on the marble floor. It was the only sound in the universe. A cold, sharp metronome counting down the seconds of her life. A relentless, tiny percussion against the vast, cold silence of his empire. She had been dismissed. Go. Eat. A command. A benediction. A curse. He had cast her out of the war room, so the war could begin. She was a ghost, haunting the periphery. She had gathered her tray, her chawan, her whisk, her weapons, and she was retreating. Her entire being screamed for fuel, for safety, but she forced her retreat to be measured, graceful, a performance even in exit. The void wasn't just in her stomach, it was her. She was a walking, hollow thing. The room, the vast glass box of night, tilted, a ship on a black, starless ocean. The go table, with its two serpents, their heads bowed over a slate of light, was the shore, and it was receding, fading into a puddle of light and shadow. She was drifting away from the center of power. Her back was to them, a terrible, vulnerable position. Every nerve in her spine was alight. 1,000 needles of awareness. She could be shot. A stray bullet. A surgical strike. A loose end to be tidied. Number. He would not let her be harmed. She knew this. It was not a comfort. It was a fact. A cold, hard stone in the void of her stomach. It did not warm her. It anchored her. She was his. And he protected his property. His fingers brushed hers. A jolt. Fire. Ice. The memory was a brand. It seared her skin. A static charge that leapt from his flesh to hers. An imprint left on her nerves. She snatched her hand back. And he smiled. He knew. He had done it on purpose. It was a test. A probe. A taste. She reached her door. Her cell. Her sanctuary. She slid it open. The hiss of wood on track was deafening. She slid it closed. Silence. A new silence. Not the void's peaceful emptiness. Not the war room's tense hush. This was a gray, padded, sterile silence. The silence of a tomb. The silence of waiting. Her tray was heavy, her implements, her mother's bowl. She placed it on the low table. She knelt. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. Now they were shaking. A violent, uncontrollable tremor, a storm, the discipline, the gong fu, the scaffolding that had held for hours. It had braced her spine, steadied her hands, cleared her mind. And now, in the silence, in the safety, it collapsed. Her body was betraying her. Number. Her body was screaming the truth. She was terrified. She was starving. She was furious. And she was alive. Go. Eat. The master's command. She looked at her kitchen. The black, sterile box. She rose. Her legs were water. Jelly. They buckled. She stumbled. She caught herself on the wall. The cool painted surface was a shock. Pathetic. Bow's word. A ghost's insult. Number, Jin's word. Discipline. She straightened. She pushed off the wall. She willed her muscles to obey. She walked. Click, click, click. Her own feet on her own floor. She opened the refrigerator. It was not empty. It was not full. It was perfect. A single tray. A black lacquer tray. On it, a single porcelain bowl. Covered. And next to it, a note. Mrs. Hino. Number. The calligraphy was not hers. It was too perfect, too strong. A man's hand. Bold black strokes of ink. A single character. Shoku. Eat. May's blood ran cold. It was not Mrs. Hino. It was him. He had known. He had known she would be starving. He had known she would return here. He had known she would need fuel. He had anticipated everything. The burner for the tea, the food for the void. She was not a confidant. She was not a pet. She was a pawn, a stone on his board, a valuable piece, and he took care of his pieces. She took the bowl. It was cold. She placed it in the microwave, a sterile white box. She pressed the buttons. The hum violated the silence. A dull, mechanical drone. She waited. She looked at her reflection in the black microwave door. A ghost. A wraith. In his black silk. Her hair a storm. Her eyes two black holes. Hollow, starved. Who are you? I am Mei Ling. I am the tea master. I am the daughter of a sentimental man. The microwave beeped. A shrill, modern insult. Twice. 3 times. She took the bowl. It was hot. The heat seared her cold hands. A good pain. She carried it to her low table. She sat. She knelt. Caesar. Discipline. Even now. Especially now. She lifted the lid. Steam. A cloud of heaven. It rose in a spiral, carrying the scent of ocean and earth. It was congee. But not the simple white gruel of her childhood. Not the watery sustenance of her past. This was Jin's congee. The rice was perfectly broken. A creamy ivory ocean. And in it, treasures. Abalone, jewel black and pearly, scallops, sweet white morsels, goji berries, red tears, shreds of ginger, gold, kintsugi in a bowl, brokenness and luxury fused together. It was sustenance. It was power. It was wealth. It was him. He was feeding her his power, reminding her of his control. She picked up the spoon. A porcelain spoon. Cold. She dipped it in. She lifted it to her lips. Her hands were not shaking. Discipline returned. She ate. The heat was a shock. The flavor, an explosion. Salt, sweet, ocean, earth, umami, a profound depth that coated her tongue. It hit the void in her stomach and detonated. Life. She ate. She did not devour. She did not rush. She tasted. She honored Ichigo Ichie. She honored this bowl. She honored this moment. She was eating her master's food, in her master's cage. After surviving her master's test. Fire. Ice. His fingers brushed hers. The jolt. It returned, stronger. She stopped. The spoon hovered. What was that? It was not hate. It was not fear. Those were cold. This was hot. It was something else. A current. A wire. A live wire. He had touched her. Deliberately. And she had reacted. Instinctively. Not with ice, but with fire. He knew. He knew she was not calm. He knew she was fire. And he wanted to play with it. He wanted to see it burn. She ate. The food was strength. The strength was clarity. The Scandinavian, the surgeon, his crack. He was not a brute. He was like Jin, a different serpent. They were negotiating a price, the price of surgery, a betrayal from within his own ranks. The slate. The reflection in Jin's eyes. He had not been surprised. Not surprised. He had been disappointed. That flat, dead voice, the voice for her father. He was sentimental. The ultimate sin. This betrayal was sentimental, emotional, weak, and Jin hated weakness. She finished the kanji. She wiped the bowl clean. The void was full. Her body was warm. Her mind was sharp. She was not Mei-ling. She was not Mei. She was the tea master. And she waited. She knew he would return. The surgery would be silent. It would be clean. The Scandinavian was a professional. She heard nothing. No shouts, no shots, no screams. The penthouse was silent. The city beyond the glass was silent. Hours, 1 hour, 2. She did not sleep. She did not move. She knelt. She sat. Caesar. She meditated. But it was not peace, not emptiness. It was gong fu. It was discipline. It was readiness. She wasn't emptying her mind. She was sharpening it. She was staring into the void within herself. Acknowledging the fear, the rage, the hunger, the fire his touch had sparked. She acknowledged it all. And she sheathed it. She was coiling. She was waiting. She was honing her ice and banking her fire. She was waiting for the serpent. The click. It was not her door. It was the main elevator. The private one. A hiss and a thud. He was back. The surgeons were gone. She waited. Click, click, click. His shoes, on marble, slow, deliberate, tired, number, measured, coming closer, not to the void, not to his study, not to the go table. Here. He stopped outside her door. The silence screamed. It stretched. A wire pulled taut. He knew she was awake. He knew she was waiting. The door slid open. He stood in the frame. He was not a shadow. He was a void in the hallway light. His black silk kimono, undisturbed, pristine, not a drop of blood. Surgeons. He looked at her. Kneeling, waiting, calm. The empty congee bowl on the table. Clean. Wiped. Perfect. He looked at the bowl. He looked at her. He was not Jinn. He was not the Serpent. He was something else. He was tired. Not physical, not emotional. Psychologically exhausted. The betrayal. The surgery. The negotiation. It had cost him. He stepped inside, into her room. He had never done this. Another line crossed. Another boundary erased. He walked past her. He walked to her window. The small crack of glass that looked out at nothing. At a wall. He stared at the wall. The surgery was a success, he whispered. His voice was not silk. It was sand, gravel, raw. The cancer is removed. He turned. He looked at her. Kneeling. Still. A demon of stillness. It was messy. He had not lied. Ever. But this was not a lie. It was a confession. And now, he said, I must think. He looked around her gray, sterile room, his creation, his cage. He looked at her. I find, he whispered, that I can only think clearly. He stepped closer, in the silence. He loomed over her, casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. That you create. He was not asking. He was stating a fact. He was addicted. He had come here for his drug. Peace. Chapter 12. Peace. The word hung in the air. It was the last word in his confession. The silence that you create. He loomed, black silk and shadow. He swallowed the light from her small gray room. He dominated the air, drinking in the oxygen, replacing it with his scent. Sandalwood, ozone, and something else. Metallic, faint, blood. It was messy. He was addicted. To her, number. Not to her. To the silence, to the peace. He was addicted to an effect she produced. She was not a person. She was a drug, a thing, a tool. Her fire, sparked by his touch, turned to ice. A cold, brittle fury. She had endured bow, survived the leopard, faced the surgeon, served the serpent, and this was her reward. To be reclassified. From collateral to narcotic. He didn't move. He stood. Looming. Breathing. This was the thinking. He hadn't come here to speak. He had come to be. To use her silence as a whetstone, to sharpen his mind after the messy surgery. He was using her presence to calm the violence within him. The air was screaming. The silence was deafening. He closed his eyes. A flicker of black lashes against pale skin. It was the most vulnerable thing she had ever seen him do. An act of absolute trust. Or absolute arrogance. He knew she would not move. He knew she would not strike. She was his peace. And in that moment, with his eyes closed, as he breathed in her silence, a thought detonated in her mind. The debt. It's over. The betrayal. The surgery. The cancer. Removed. That was it. The books were balanced, not with money, but with blood. Bow's blood, the leopard's, and tonight's messy surgery. Her father's sentimental sin had been erased. She should be free. The word was alien, freedom. It tasted like ash. She had to know. She couldn't live another second as a drug. She had to know if she was still a prisoner. She opened her mouth. The sound was tiny. A betrayal of the peace. Goshujin-sama? His eyes snapped open. The black, gold-flecked fire returned. He had been drifting. She had pulled him back. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. The mouse had squeaked. "You spoke," he whispered. "Not an accusation, an observation, discipline, ice." She forced her voice steady. "The surgery," she said. Her voice was a stranger. Hollow. Hoarse. "The betrayal. The cancer." He watched her, his head tilted. A serpent studying prey. "It is done," she whispered. "The problem is solved. The weakness is gone." "Yes," he breathed, pleased that she understood. "Now," she bowed her head. "Discipline, protocol." "The debt," she said, her voice trembling with the force of her will. "My father's debt." "It is paid?" Silence. He was smiling. She didn't need to see it. She felt it. The air changed. The shadow over her lifted slightly. She dared to look up. He was, the serpent's smile, cold, beautiful, terrifying. He was proud. "So clever," he whispered. "My little demon of stillness. You miss no stone. You see the whole board." He stepped back. One step. He gave her air. "Yes, Mei Ling," he said, his voice clear, formal. "Your father's sentimental error has been balanced. The debt is paid. Paid." The word echoed. She closed her eyes. The relief was so profound, so absolute, it hurt. It was physical. A mountain lifted off her chest. Her father was avenged. His honor restored by her service. She was free. She moved to rise, to bow one last time, to gather her mother's bowl and walk out of this cage. His voice cut the air. "But you are not going anywhere." She froze. Relief shattered. Ice returned. She looked up. The smile was gone. His face was calm, flat, impassive. This was not a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. "What?" The word was stolen from her lungs. "The debt," he said, enunciating each syllable like he was speaking to a child. "The debt is paid. That was a transaction, a contract of blood, money, and honor. It is closed." He stepped forward. The shadow returned. "But we have no contract, Mei Ling." He knelt. He knelt in front of her. Her mind stalled. He was on her level, not looming, not master, eye to eye, gold-flecked black, fire and night. The intimacy was unbearable. It was worse than his power. It was terrifying. "I told you," he whispered. "I'm addicted." "To this." He gestured, not at her, but at the air between them. This silence, this clarity, this peace. "I can't think without it. Without you. You calm the violence in me. You sharpen my mind. You are the only thing in this city that is not a lie. You are my peace." His eyes dropped to her mouth. A flicker. Fire. Ice. Her breath caught. He wanted dash. "You can't keep me," she breathed. It wasn't defiance. It was despair. "The debt is paid." "The debt is irrelevant," he hissed. The serpent was back. Impatient. "I'm not keeping you because of a debt. I'm keeping you because I want to." He reached out. His hand. Long. Pale. An artist's hand. He didn't brush her fingers. He cupped her jaw. Contact. Skin on skin. His hand was cold. Cold from the night air. Cold from the marble. Cold from the surgery. But the place he touched burned. Fire. She gasped. He held her. His thumb pressed against the pulse pounding in her neck. He felt it. Felt her fear. felt her fire. He smiled. That smile. Just for her. You're not a prisoner, Mei-ling. Prisoners dream of escape. He leaned closer. Sandalwood. Ozone. Blood. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. Paralyzed. Transfixed. A bird in a silken cage. You belong to me now. He leaned in. His lips brushed her ear. A searing electric shock. Your father's debt is paid, he whispered. Your own debt begins now.